Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dota Underlords podcast, episode 4. My name is Sunspan, joined by Zeno and Swim as always. Savjz is our very special guest today. Savjz, how are you doing, my friend? It's been a long time, buddy.
It has been a long time. Like we kind of talked to each other during the artifact days a little bit more, but now we have a live game at our hands, and today's patch has been a big one. And we've been talking about this with Swim for a while that I could come on the podcast, and I felt like today is a fantastic day to do so because there's so much to talk about with all these changes.
Indeed, and we'll get started with that very shortly, but we have to do some selling out, guys. We have 0 sponsors for this podcast, in case you were wondering, but we do have a couple great reviews to go through, guys, on the Apple, because this is available on Google, Spotify, and Apple. Who wants to take the first review? Who has the link here? Zeno, please.
Does that mean that Instant Pot hasn't gotten back to us yet? Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. 0 sponsors yet. This is the premiere and I think only podcast for Underlords. So cash in now while you can. Take a review. Do it to it.
I don't know why you're asking me, man. You threw
all right,
this out
I
here
will read
it. You have them right in front of you.
From Omaha OX, great Underlords podcast, 5 stars. Great podcast with excellent hosts. I just wish it was called the Underlords Academy. Too bad, my friend. I'm sorry. We did rebrand to the Underlords podcast because I personally was disgusted by the name previously. And then the second review, another great podcast from Tyler Furr. This podcast is great, and the hosts are even better. They use a fun conversational tone. I've learned a ton. Turns out the game has nothing to do with regular chess, though. Turns out I've been playing the wrong game. Can't wait to try the game for real sometime. Excellent. Welcome, my chess friend, to Dota Underlords indeed. Okay. Swim, before we actually get started with the patch, we are going to the We Play event as casters.
Yeah.
In Ukraine. Are you excited?
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
Good.
Are you?
Very excited. Savjz, are you playing in this tournament, by the way? Savjz, hello? Can you hear me, Savjz?
Hey.
Are you going to this tournament, friend?
I am not going to that tournament.
Aww. But are you playing?
When was it? No.
Really? Oh, because
I'm focusing on my stream right now. I got a lot going on, so I didn't want to try to cram it in. I have to stream an excessive amount of hours too, for contractual reasons. Because I did a little bit less in June. I took some time off. I was in Las Vegas for a week for Magic tournament, and so this month is going to be very heavy on the streaming.
I see. Because this could have been a great opportunity for you to win. Because Swim's not playing; he's casting. The greatest, the greatest player of our time will not be playing in this tournament. So you might have to rethink that, my friend. But all right. What I want to do is go through the patch, and we don't need to go through everything. I just want to highlight the big stuff, perhaps, and we can have some talking points. And at the end, I definitely want to talk to Savjz a little bit about Underlords as a whole, if that sounds good to you guys. So
sure.
Yeah, let's get into the patch.
So this is the biggest patch by far for Underlords thus far. And of course, the biggest one is the new terrain, guys. Can we agree that this is the biggest change by far in the patch?
I immediately went on and changed it. It's been an enjoyable, nice, light, refreshing. You hear the nice nature sounds in the background. You get the sun coming in.
That's nice.
I'm thinking about changing it back just to be honest.
I knew you would.
I don't like the sun.
I knew you'd do this.
I've been waiting to get out of the dungeon for so long. I know it's not actually a dungeon. It was an alley, but I'm not going back to the alley for a while. I'm going to be all about the forest now for at least a month, maybe even longer.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, then you'll have a desert or something else. So
people love to be happy, but if you're Swim, you have to do everything against the grain, right? That's just the style.
I want to live in the dungeon, dude. I don't want to go outside. It's perfect for me, dude.
You just want to try to mimic your real life as much as possible. Right. Just don't ever leave the house.
Yeah, you think I'm joking? I'm getting some blackout curtains for these windows behind.
Yeah, I was about to say, this is an audio medium, but for those of you that can't see this, he has a nice bright window just shining in from the background, and I'm just wondering when I'm going to see a black wall of heavy curtains right there instead. Apparently soon is the answer.
So Savjz, we were talking before the podcast officially started that there was actually a big part of the notes that were missing, one line, if you will. Do you want to talk about how big of a change this is for the game and what the change actually is that's missing from the notes?
So So anybody who's seen the patch notes, it's like the most massive thing you've ever seen. Like it's just like page after page after page, so many changes and everything. But there's one line missing. So right now, when you are losing rounds, every time you lose a round, you take one more damage than you would have in the previous patch. So that basically does like two things. Like the obvious thing is that like the games are shorter. So we went from the 42-minute or whatever 40-minute average. It's probably like I don't know yet how much. Is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes on the average length? But the games are now faster. So I think everyone probably agrees that that's a good thing. But the other thing that it does is that if you're having a bit of like a bad start, like the early game, there's like way less room to maneuver, and I think some people are thinking it's like good change, and other ones are like it's not such a good change. But what it does, the big impact is that these like early saving up strategies where you used to go for 50 interest gold fast, like that strategy is no longer as good as it was. The early game is much tighter. You want to win all the rounds. Like you don't necessarily want to go on a losing streak because even if you manage to stabilize, maybe there's a couple of guys who are really, really strong and you get knocked out. So it's way more dangerous right now to go for like a losing streak or some kind of economy heavy early game.
You guys agree?
I'm kind of curious too. Like I like this change. I wonder if in conjunction with limiting the lose streak gold, that might be something they would consider bringing back. If they want to punish people a little bit more earlier for lose streaking. Like I think that's good because that strategy from a deliberate standpoint can get a little frustrating for some people, but sometimes you really just don't hit anything. And having that third lose streak gold when you are in those situations, if you're already taking more damage now, it's kind of like a double nerf. And I wonder if maybe they'll choose to maybe bring back a little bit of that gold money.
Swim.
Oh yeah, well I was thinking another thing they could do is just like have every like 10 rounds or whatever, just have like a special mode where you go into this like area where there's like 8 heroes rotating around on this big thing in the middle, and you just like take turns making a hero. That could be a decent comeback mechanic. Like jokes aside, I do think I like the pace of the game more. I do like it being faster. I do like more aggressive things mattering, but like Zeno says, I think like some tweaks could be in order, and like Savjz pointed out, I do think it feels a little bit more high rolly for like early game rolls can be very punishing if you kind of like feel like you're getting screwed. So some tweak to that, and then this is a really good system.
Indirect huge buff to Aegis, guys. Everyone's favorite item, Aegis making a comeback. Good. I will say this, not to be edgy like Swim loves to be, and I'm actually very surprised he doesn't even agree with me on this, just because he likes to go against the grain like we talked about. Aegis is a little bit underrated right now. Everyone thinks it's garbage. It is not garbage. It's better than before.
I took Tranquil Boots over Aegis on round 3, and I still do after this match.
Wow. Okay. Huge
I am
mistake.
completely on Team Swim on this one. Like I don't understand why you play to lose instead of playing to win a little bit more early. And then
well, it depends on what if you're getting. Like I'm not saying you take it over actual good items, but over Tranquil Boots. Come on, dude.
On round 3.
Come on.
Maybe Tranquil Boots saves you 2 health in 3 different battles. You get 6 more health. It gives you an Aegis half the time, anyways. Like,
the thing is, Sunspan, it might seem like Aegis is better because health is more important. But the way health is more important is because fighting for winning battles matters more, because when you lose, you take even more damage. So items that like keep your health up, even at Tranquil Boots, there's 15 human rounds between 3 and 20, which is like kind of the part where like real fights start and players are getting knocked out. Tranquil Boots wins you like 1 or 2 fights in that time, and it's already gotten you like as much health as an Aegis will.
All right, moving
personally,
on.
I would probably like still rework the item. Like I don't like it at all. I would just do it something like it's either you give it to a unit, and when the unit dies, it comes back to life with half health. Or I know there's similar types of items in like Guardian Angel in TFT and all that. But I the way it works right now, it's definitely not my thing. I mean, I don't hate it, but I definitely try to avoid it as much as I can.
I think that's a really good idea. Like equipping it to a hero, that TFT item you were talking about. That's cool.
Yeah.
Sunspan.
I'm a big TFT hater, so maybe that's not a good talking point. So something that was a pretty huge change in the patch notes. A lot of heroes, in fact, I would say most of them, got buffs at level 3, and it's actually easier to get level 3 units because of, I think, the sheer fact that what was that patch note where when you roll, you won't get another hero that was in the previous pack that you didn't select?
Yeah.
So it's technically easier to find these level 3 units. They're actually better than before. In conjunction with more units being tier 5 now, try and dilute that tier 5 pool. Do you guys like these changes? What was it, like a 20% increase in damage overall to most units for level 3s? Is it worth going for level 3s now?
Yeah, 3 stars matter a lot more. In addition to everything you just mentioned, there's also one less 3-star hero in the entire pool when you count it all up. And this seems insignificant, but it actually really does make a difference. It's easier to find, or I meant 3 cost. It's easier to find 3 stars for 3 costs now by a noticeable amount.
I definitely like that, because I do think that when you hit a 3-star unit, and especially when it's 3 gold or higher, that it should have this like big impact. And in the past, I do think that to some extent it was just not worth going for it, because you're gonna have so much gold on your bench before it's completed, and like it was just waiting like 12 gold worth of stuff, and then you hit it, and it's kind of like some units like Viper, for example, they were just not worth it like ever. There were some units that were worth it. Like I would argue that like Slark, for example, is a good one that was worth going for it already.
And
but
he got buffed on top of that,
the 3-star units were not.
Yeah, this feels like also like directly with Assassins. Like there are a lot of good Assassin buffs anyways, but Assassins is something where you tend to roll pretty hard for getting a couple level 3s too. So Assassins do well with more damage. So I'm excited to... I think Assassins to me seem like they'll be pretty strong after this patch.
And I think the biggest difference between Auto Chess and Underlords, like keep in mind that a lot of this stuff was just brought over, right? A 1-to-1. The HP and damage just doubled each level. But the fact that you can't stack items mean that the level 3s, like Luna, for example, are not nearly as good or not nearly as impactful. But now they have 20% damage increase across the board. It's, all these things add up, and I do agree that it's going to change a lot. Speaking of changing a lot, Warlocks got a small nerf, not as big as I thought in terms of the actual heal that they receive, but their pride and joy, their best unit, Enigma, is now a disgusting shaman. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Dirty shaman.
I wanted to add to that I think that there was also some other ones that got hit, like Necro was with the increased cooldown.
Yeah.
I think that was a big one. So like the Warlocks individually used to be so powerful. I think that was a big part of it. So even though the Warlock synergy, I would say that the nerf from the Warlock bonus is kind of like a small one, like in combination with the individual nerfs to some of the best Warlocks and then Enigma change that you mentioned. I think that it's probably sufficient.
I agree. The 50% increase on cooldown on Necro is pretty big. It was a pretty rapid fire heal plus Warlock trigger before. Just really quickly to throw out, like I do think they did make a nice change basing it off of percentage health instead of just the numerical health value. Like sometimes you would end up with like situations where you have like a 2-star Pudge tanking when you have like a 1-star whatever, like Drow or Medusa backline. You'd end up trying to Warlock heal a full health unit instead, which is always a little weird.
I wanted to add to this Warlock thing, and I think this is a good time that, like this morning, when I started playing on the new patch and stuff, like one of the first things that I said was that the one that escaped all these nerfs, because there's been left and right, like nerfs here, nerfs there. The one that dodged all the nerfs was Shadow Fiend, and I think the Shadow Fiend is just, it's the best mage. It's ridiculous amount of damage. Like if you have a 2-star Shadow Fiend, I'm really shocked. I'm surprised that they didn't touch Shadow Fiend at all. I think it's even without 3 mages, like the amount of damage at level 2 Shadow Fiend dishes out is kind of nuts.
Yeah, I think with the Warlock bonus, he doesn't gain as much versus the other Warlocks, right? Because he's a 1 cast. He's a 1. What's the word for it? 1 horse pony. That's not. I'm just making that up. That's going to be the new saying. What's the saying? Come on. Somebody.
What?
One shot.
Pony? I don't
is
know
it a
what
one
you're
shot?
going
All right,
for.
anyway, he blows his load in 1 shot. All right, that's the not safe for work version.
Chump?
Whatever the saying actually is. But yeah, no, Shadow Fiend. Shadow Fiend. Oh, 1 trick pony. That was way off. All right, that's fine. English is not my first language, guys. Wink, wink. But no, Shadow Fiend is super legit, obviously. So I agree. I don't know. We'll see if they tweak him in the future. But there's so many changes right now. It's tough to say. It's tough to like narrow in on one thing and say, is it still as good as before, just because of so many other things changing across the board. You know, Swim. Any thoughts on Enigma or the Warlocks in general?
Yeah, no, I mean, it does certainly feel like a lost like a horse pony somewhere along the way. He does feel a lot worse, and it feels like the Warlock meta is definitely knocked out a bit. You can still do Warlock with like Shadow Fiend over Enigma. Oddly enough, Shamans actually are kind of cheeky right now because for Primordial ends up being kind of decent, possibly good. It's hard to say. It's a little early, and you can just like slap in Enigma, get the third Shaman. You know, why not? It's not the worst thing ever.
Okay. I'm interested. I have legitimately never actually seen the new Shaman buff in a game, just because, well, before this patch there was only 3 to choose from, and you never want those 3 together. Never want them together in a lineup. So with Enigma, that might change a little bit going forward. All right, so a bunch of units got tier changes, which of course correlates to the cost as well. So I'll just quickly list all of them. Hopefully this is a complete list. Veno becomes a 1-tier unit, tier 1 unit versus a tier 3 from before. Clockwork and Tinker, this is the weirdest one that I have to really get used to. Previously tier 1 are now tier 3. Treant, no surprise, goes from 2 to 3. Medusa from 4 to 5. Tide from 5 to 4, and he's now a Tide Warrior. They're renaming him. Something like that, I would hope so. Razor from a 3 to 1. Sand King, my favorite assassin, from 3 to 4. Troll from 4 to 5, and he got some huge buffs in terms of his stats as well. And then Windrager from 3 to 2. Do you guys want to talk about any of these specifically?
We can spend some time here. There's so much to talk about.
There is. I'm also like thinking, where do we start? Like, so I want to talk about the Primordials a lot too.
Let's start with Clockwork and Tinker, because Scrappy Inventors got changed a bit, right? The buff is now based on how many units you have on the board currently, which is really cool. So if you like lose a unit, and as long as you have less units than your opponent, you gain that extra buff. And of course, the changes to the Clockwork and Tinker's tiers. How do you guys think this works now?
I was actually just gonna skip talking about Clockwork and Tinker. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't like those. I mean, I didn't like hate the change, but like those, I tried to play with them, and just spending 9 gold on a level 2 Clockwork.
Yeah.
Even if it's slightly better stats, like it just doesn't feel right. There's just something wrong with that. Like I can't justify the 9 gold on the Clockwork.
I will say,
felt really bad to me, both that and the Tinker as well. So maybe like once there's some kind of hero rotation, like bye. I wouldn't miss
that.
Those.
Could definitely be the
Those
case.
felt
And
bad.
like Tinker's level 3 feels like a bit of a meme with the 0.5 cooldown. I don't know how that ever would even work for you. But Clockwork, if you get him to level 3, the half what was the what's this freaking thing called? Battery Assault is twice as fast, essentially. That is a huge DPS increase for him. That's really good. Really
gold
good.
to get it.
That's the only downside. Okay. Just saying, in theory, as a 3-cost unit, like how often does a skill increase that dramatically? Right? It's usually just stats. And
the
ability
Tinker one
scales
too,
normally.
like a 0.5 second cooldown. Seems like in theory maybe it's good. Again, it's just like one of those things where, and maybe this is just something I need to adapt to coming into this patch, but like I never got a tier 3-cost unit in like the last 3 weeks of playing this game. Maybe with the exception of Assassins, right? Just because it's such a large investment. And again, like for the most part before, you're just trying to roll for get to like level 9 and get tier 5 units or whatever. So maybe that will change. Maybe we'll start going for more of these things. We'll see more creative usage for different units like that. But I don't see it right now. But I haven't really got a chance to play it too much either.
One change that we can discuss briefly that I really like is Troll from 4 to 5, because I never found Troll level 2 anyway. So this change is nothing for me. So him being a legendary is he's just actually stronger now, if you can get him. What do you guys think?
They doubled his DPS, so it's basically like you find a 2-star Troll Warlord for like 5 gold.
Precisely a 2-star Troll Warlord.
Yeah, with a little bit less health.
Yeah. In my one game that I have played in this patch tonight, I managed to throw him in, and it seems like for just something to get in there to do some damage in kind of mid game. Maybe not something to build around, but it's a solid damage unit that you don't really need any crazy synergies to get around. So I don't know. That seems okay.
I mean, it scales really well with items. It's really like fantastic. I think if you get some kind of like dials on the troll warlord or whatever, like I think it's good.
So Medusa to tier 5 now, and then they kind of, I don't know what the stats used to be, but they basically reverted the split shot to what it was before, I feel like, or maybe even it's better now. And Tide is no longer a hunter, so there's only 6 hunters in the game at the moment, and he is a warrior. That one will probably take the most getting used to.
Yeah, I think these two heroes kind of got ass blasted by those changes. I think like Medusa, so if you look at Troll Warlord, he literally got double DPS. Medusa, when you like math it out, it depends how many targets she's hitting, but her DPS increases closer to 20% instead of 100%. And it just kind of falls off for like not being able to hit like a 2-star very often. It's typically not really worth going her anymore. And Scotty change hurts her as well, it being harder to find. And then Tidehunter just like with the 1-cell Ravage just feels so bad.
Yeah, I wanted to add on those like the Tidehunter change and the Medusa thing, that something that I figured out pretty fast was that there's some like real problems with going for 6 hunters now. Because like, it's like the same thing as before with the 6 scrappies. Like, what if you don't get a techies? Well, now there's no room because Tidehunter is not a hunter. You have to get exactly Medusa, and Medusa is 5 gold. So like trying to go for 6 hunters seems like something that's really risky. And right now, I think like my initial impression is that it's not worth it. Like even if you get it, it's not a tier 1 strategy necessarily.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the fact that you have 2 warriors now that are scaled? Does that make a big difference? You can have Slardar and Tide in the same lineup.
Really cool with the global item. If you can snag the global item from like round 10 or round 15 creeps, if you can get that, because then you can make like a 3 warrior tank line where you have Slardar and you have Tidehunter, and if you 2-star both and you have the global item, it's like really convenient. You get the magic resist, you get the like they actually deal good damage and they're durable. So I think with the global item, it's really tempting to go for Slardar and Tide now. For 3 warrior, like
the Retaliate got a bit of a nerf, right? It used to do 80 damage. I forget what it does now. It's like 50 maybe, I want to say. It's a lot.
It was like 60 for the level 3.
Okay.
So it's a slight downgrade, but if you have like those like faster frontline Nagas, it's kind of better in a way, I guess. Could be.
Okay. So Savjz, I don't know if you probably didn't catch the last podcast, but I got ass blasted by everybody else because I like Venomancer. I'm like a Venomancer lover, even though he was very okay. Oh my God. I will say he was mostly bad before because he was buggy. Okay, there was a lot of bugs. They've been fixed. He is now a tier 1 unit versus a tier 3, and they barely even changed his stats. Let's be real. Do you guys think he? By Swim's reaction, I can tell he still thinks this is a garbage unit. Thoughts on
that's good.
Veno? Oh,
if you get him 2-star, early 2 Tooth and Claw dependent, you need either the 2-star or the Tooth and Claw, but he can put in some work.
Okay, so nothing's changed in that department.
I think it's really gold efficient now. Like right now, like the bang for the buck that you get for 3 gold to have a 2-star Veno, or like if you get the 3-star Veno for 9 gold, like I think it's really efficient unit. It's not really something I would dream of having in my final lineup, but like going into mid game, having a 2-star Veno, or maybe like in late mid game having like a 3-star Veno, I think that's great.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of decent Savjz builds you can do to kind of be okay early game, and just because it's a 1-cost unit, you just sell out of it, right? And it doesn't cost you anything, whereas obviously it did before. So in that context is good. I still don't know that it's going to do anything for you past around 25 or something like that, but maybe at least a little bit more useful than the complete non-use that it was before.
How dare you?
I think another big thing about the Veno right now is that because you can get those like global items early, and Veno just happens to like scale really well with multiple global items. You can get the Summoning Stone, which like doubles the health on your totems and like almost like 50% or 45% more attack speed. It scales super well with that, and with like the with the Savjz, like the bleed effect also, because they are Savjz totems or whatever, like wards. They are Savjz, so they also stack the bleed. So it's not too difficult to like snatch one of those or maybe even both. And in that case, Venom gets a lot better.
Yeah, I think like one of the interesting things about like Veno is that it tends to get better just from like the meta shift. Because like Savjz was saying early on, games are ending like 5 to 10 rounds faster for like a lot of players right now. So strategies that typically are going to fall off, like in an ideal world, you could definitely like get off of something like a Veno. But right now, especially if you're close to 3-starring him, there's definitely a lot more situations where you feel very happy ending the game with a Veno on your final board. Maybe like you get double Tooth and Claw or something like that. You can like ride 4 Savjz into like round 25 when the game is closing out for half the players.
Mm-hmm. Right. And like I think another thing too is like because this is a pretty viable early mid-game build, in conjunction with Vicious Intent now coming as an option a little bit earlier in the game, that was something I was kind of excited to see because I feel like you can kind of uniquely have some lineups that can put a lot of pressure on people in a really shocking, crazy way, a lot earlier than people might expect. So that might be another situation where that would be kind of a cool lineup to play around with.
So, I got hit today. I got hit 25 damage in a single fight on round 13 in a game.
Mm-hmm.
Some guy got Smuggler and Vicious Intent on 10 and just dumped his entire economy into
the dream. The dream. That's awesome. Okay, that's cool. That's like
I don't know about you guys, but like, I really like having Vicious Intent earlier in the game. Like I think that's a really fun shift in pressure windows for Underlords.
So in terms of early game units, the biggest change by far is Treant Protector becoming a 3-cost, because he was, I mean, would you guys disagree? He was literally the best like unit to get to a 2-star from early to mid game. It's just like this constant, you just get destroyed as long as you have Enchantress there to buff him up.
It was pretty all right.
So, yep. So a 3-cost unit now, so harder to get. And his stats, I want to say, didn't change that much. Like, didn't get upgraded heavily, which means they feel that he was very overpowered before, I would assume. And his Leech Seed now, they nerfed that quite a bit as well. The fact that it doesn't heal while the body that it's attached to is dead is, I think, huge. And it's only a 1-cell radius, I think, is huge as well. So how good is Treant right now?
Well, the nerfs were absolutely massive, but he deserves every bit of that. I think Treant is pretty bad right now, unless you have the global item. Like, they did buff the global item on Druids. It has now 2-yard radius. So when your Treant dies, because he had a slightly more health too. So if you like spike him to like 3 stars with your Druids or something, when he dies, he actually puts like a massive heal on like most of your stuff. And they also buffed that the Lone Druid in like a couple of ways. Like now when the Lone Druid Bear dies, you get a heal running on your guys because it counts as a Druid. And also the Lone Druid maximum mana is 60, so he basically always gets the Bear off and he gets it earlier. So in Druids, like I imagine that you could actually have like decent frontline with Treant Protector and Lone Druid, especially with the global item.
Yeah, that global item is actually insane. Like I think, and again, maybe this is just like learning to adapt to new changes, but like at least before, like the first like 4 or 5 seconds of a round are so important, and like getting 100% dodge for the beginning of fights, like especially like maybe if like you're running assassins, right? You don't even need elusive synergy. You can just throw literally like a level 1 Treant. It doesn't even matter. You get 100% dodge. They get no mana off of it, and you get all that time to run around and wreak havoc on the back line. So I to me at least, again, first impressions seem like the elusive global is pretty nuts.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one for the Treant as well. Like I even forgot about that one. Like that's actually big. Like 4 seconds is a long time, like you said. I totally agree with that. So if you get that one, or if you get even the other one, the other one used to be terrible, but now it's slightly less bad. But
I'm gonna miss Treant trying to tank while being invisible. That was so fun to watch. You know, he just struggled so horribly. That was my favorite thing. When you pick it, you're like, oh shit, what did I literally just threw the game by picking this global item. Sven, what do you think as we move forward?
I mean, oddly enough, the elusive global item is very powerful. It's kind of almost a nerf to elusive comps, though, in a weird way, just because now all you need is like one elusive, and sometimes up to three. But like, if you have the elusive global, you don't really want more than at very most three elusives to kind of like just tank for that duration. I think it's really strong though. It's basically a stun for the entire team for like those 3 seconds.
Yeah, but then there's like I think that you don't actually get mana from like hits when
Exactly.
you dodge, so your opponent gets all the ults off first, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't get mana on your guys.
Well, they don't get mana when you dodge either.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like
Yeah.
that's actually kind of an issue. I mean, overall it's probably still good. I didn't play with it yet, but I think it's probably good.
Yeah.
All right. Global items now have tiers. What are our thoughts on this? Is a huge change to items in terms of the globals. So you can get basically a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. And we verified with the devs a couple days ago that you can get multiple of these, of course, but you can't get different tiers of the same item in the same game. So in theory, we talked about these very fringe cases where if you have a tier 2 item that you really want, you could lose on purpose. If you know that you have that tier 2 item, you can get a duplicate by losing against neutrals, because that's another change. Neutrals are stronger, and if you lose, you no longer get items deleted from your choice. Instead, it just goes down one tier. What are our thoughts on all these changes as an amalgamation, if you will?
I'll just quickly jump in on the alliance thing, because I feel like I had a reaction to this initially where I thought this was a garbage change, and I feel like I was really wrong. So maybe just to quickly just clarify that a little bit. My first reaction is like, now you're just getting, I don't know, like to me, like when you're hitting things like tier 3 things that like significantly buff like one lineup that you just happen to hit or don't hit, that kind of sucks. But then I went to sleep and I woke up the next day and I went, wait a second. There's only like 3 tier 1 global alliance 1. There's like 10 tier 3. You rebalance randomly, so you're getting like a more even distribution, which means you're increasing the amount of items you find that are tier 3 items versus the globals, which means you get things that are generally more flexible for more lineups anyways. So you actually are, it's a little bit less just RNG hitting something really good or really bad for tier 3 items. So it kind of made me rethink that a little bit. So just I was wrong in my initial reaction of hating it. I still don't really have a good enough idea of how it plays out to have a great opinion, but at the very least, in theory, I like it.
In theory. How about you guys?
You want to go, Swim?
Oh, no, please.
I mean, I feel like it's a really cool system. I think it's kind of sweet, but I had some issues with the tier 1s. Because I felt like a lot of the tier 1s, like let's say like Mage tier 1, like you get the like some cooldown is at 10% health. Well, if they go to 10%, they probably die before they finish the cast. So there's a bunch of like tier 1 like globals that I feel are just like you kind of don't want them ever, like just like really weak ones. So it almost feels like a waste. There's just like less to choose from. Like who wants 0.5% dragon damage? Like per gold, like would you pick that on round 1? Would you pick that on round 2? Would you pick that on round 3? And after round 3, you don't even get it anymore. So I like the system, but I think there's bunch that like maybe didn't even need to exist at tier 1.
Yeah, I think like while tier 3 you get more items, then obviously for like tier 1 you're basically doubling the chance of finding these global alliance things. So you do end up getting just some extra garbage thrown in there.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. Like you guys are pointing out, it could use a little bit of rebalancing, but I think that's fine. I assume it's coming, but overall, I think it's an improvement to the game. I think that some of them feel just a little bit useless. I do wonder if they could kind of take out some tier 1 versions, but honestly, I don't think it's necessary.
And what's everybody's thoughts on the creeps being harder? Do they actually feel harder to you? Like, of course, we should
actually,
probably
couple
like
do.
every creep has like a mega alliance attached to it. So the creeps are just stronger in general. And yeah, what are your guys' initial impressions based on today's play?
I love it. I think okay, a couple of them are a little too hard. I think like
get closer to Mike, Swim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
I think like trolls and thunderhides are maybe a little bit too hard, but I like this strategy that you have to evolve like your play around now, especially for tomato and potato and
Yeah.
the thunderhides. You actually have to like kind of think outside the box a little bit and beat them in different ways.
Mages got
Yeah.
wrecked, right? Late game.
Yeah.
Is it 45 or it's 40 through 50 that they do almost nothing? So that's going to be real hard for mages to get tier 5 items, I feel. Go ahead, Savjz.
Yeah, I think I'm actually okay with the rest, but like the thunder hides are what like feels weird. Like, what is that healing thing? Like, you gotta like kill them twice. Like, I beaten it a couple of times, but there's just something kind of like bad feels that happens when like the heals start going off, and it's just like I don't like really understand. Like, are you supposed to just like you just take the loss if you have like mages or you don't have enough damage? The heal feels weird on the Thunderhide, so I would probably adjust that a little bit. Considering that I've been playing like these like Lord lobbies and seeing so many people like kind of getting wrecked by the creeps, I can imagine that at lower tiers of play and like for newer players, like maybe they are a little bit overtuned. But like the only one that I personally like in my like gameplay that I didn't like was maybe the Thunderhide heal thing.
Mm-hmm. And what about the idea of if you lose, you get a lower tier set of items to choose from? Does that feel better to you than the random deletion, if you will? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like before it was an origin chance that you'll just get something entirely useless, whereas now it's just you'll get the opportunity to pick something that is less good, but still at least useful for your lineup. So I think it's good.
Unless it's forced.
I really like that. I think that's a fantastic system. Like, I think it's also punishing enough on like when round 25, let's say you rolls around, like getting one tier higher item can be huge. So I think that's enough of a thing, but you don't like you're never like you're not forced to picking a druid item when you have like 6 crappies on the board or something. Mm-hmm. I like this way more.
I do like the idea of like intentionally losing a creep round, which could in theory be incentivized to do. Like earlier, actually just like 2 games ago, I was playing Bloodbound, right? And I really want big time contracts. So I was against like Tomato Potato on round 20, and I took units off my board because you have a higher chance of getting a tier 2 item if you lose to them. And I got a Blade Mail. So don't do that.
Well done, sir. Well, of course, the one caveat for this is you have to know that the item that you want is that tier for that game, right? Because you don't know what it is, so you have to already have one to really make that decision. But yeah, you got some big baller plays, but of course, a lot of times it ends up in Blade Mail, so that's really unfortunate. So a couple items were changed. Battle Fury got a huge buff. 5% increase in the cleave, I believe, and then 70 damage. That's pretty giant. Mask of Madness is now tier 3, and of course that got buffed accordingly as well. But the one I really, unless you guys want to talk about those, the Recruiter.
Yes.
Which
I want to talk about Mask of Madness. I think that was maybe a little bit overtuned. I think that the new Mask of Madness might be too good. You put it on a Slark, or you put it even on like a Troll Warlord. Like you have a 1-star Troll Warlord and give it a Mask of Madness. Like it's just like it cleans up like 1v4 on like the late rounds after the AO is done and stuff. I think the Mask of Madness might be up a little bit too much.
I think Slark is it just has to be the best assassin in the game. Everything about it got buffed. Oh, okay, actually that's not true. One thing did get nerfed. He will not. What was it? The change was something about assassins. They don't always. Sometimes they walk to units now if they're somewhat close. So he will not be pouncing constantly. Right?
I think that's for when he's in attack range at the start, which you can just like control. So
okay, so that's for like putting Sand King in the front line. Then that's what that changes essentially. Okay, that makes sense then.
But Queen of Pain got a really big buff as well. Like Sand King, Morphling, and Queen of Pain. The fact that you can kind of like frontline all of them is really, really good for their like AOE spells getting off nice and early.
Yeah, even like PA too. Like Assassins, honestly, like I don't know. It feels like a lot of things in this patch are geared towards making them pretty good.
Yes.
I think that's good. They were weak. They were really bad. But yeah, like maybe there's even a 9 assassin strategy now because you can actually like those that you mentioned, like the Sand King and stuff. You can use some of the assassins to tank. There might be a lot of like cool stuff you can do.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds really good. So last thing we'll talk about the update, unless you guys want to add anything else. Recruiter was a tier 5 before. It used to give you one free reroll per round, which I think most people thought was one of the worst items in the game. I mean, easily the worst tier 5. Now it's tier 4, and your rerolls cost 1 gold. This, I haven't gotten to try this yet, but it sounds amazing. Is it as good as it sounds, or maybe am I overrating it a bit? Especially that's
it's a little
tier
situational,
4.
but when it works really well.
Yeah, it's certainly much better than before, right? So it's a big jump up. Basically doubles the amount you can reroll. I think it's one of those weird things too, where you look at that in comparison to like friends and family discount, which now feels a little.
What if you get both?
Underwhelming.
That's the dream. You win, dude. They buff tier 3 units, or tier 3-star units. This allows you to get 3-star units much easier now. It's literally double the rolls, like you said.
I actually lost one game today to some guy who had both of them, and I was looking at the net worth at the end, and he was like 380 with like 5 3-stars,
Really?
and my gold value just for because it's kind of relevant. Mine was like 260, and he was 380.
Good lord! Wait, how early did he get that? Was this like a super late game type of thing?
Yeah, it was in the very late game. It was just us two, like when he closed out the game. But I imagine he had them very early. There were also scrappies involved, so he may have had those global items that also give him extra gold.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Okay, so that is the patch. What are your guys' overall impressions? Do you guys like it? Are there some things you don't like? Give me your just general thoughts, because for me it's overwhelmingly positive. I can't even think of the only thing that was kind of weird initially was the lone druid having only 60 mana to get off his bear, because I felt like he was already strong before. But I mean, it's not like that's a huge negative by any means. Everything just seems very positive, honestly. Would you guys agree?
There's one thing that might be kind of, especially if you're someone who plays a lot of the game and you're playing at high ranks, that might start bothering me, and that's the primordial disarm. Because even in today, I only played for 6 hours of new patch, but there were several fights where the disarms and the RNG on those kind of decided the outcome. So I think that was maybe it happened a bunch in my favor, but it could have went either way. So I think that might get a little bit old at some point if the disarms from your Eidolons or your Tiny and the primordial synergy is deciding a lot of the fights. I think that might be something that kind of is going to grind gears in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that ultimately really big. So there's some fine tuning. Some things might be, I guess, a little bit overpowered in certain ways, but I do like the general direction of this, and I like just the amount that's changed.
Yeah, I agree. Just the fact that, again, they're adding so many more different things where it feels like the issues are more tweaks than just complete overhauls. Especially, I don't want to be negative, but the last set of the general balance of the game before this patch was not necessarily super fun to play. I do sort of wonder how this game's going to play out early game if you just aren't. Yeah, every once in a while there's just some games where you have a really rough start. And now that you're taking more damage, it seems like it's going to put a lot more pressure to try and stabilize earlier. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. So I wonder when those moments hit, how frustrating that's going to feel compared to some previous iterations of the game, whether you're getting more gold early when you're loose streaking or whether you're not taking as much damage. But generally speaking, I like all the changes. I'm excited to see how it all plays out. So
that just makes me think of aggro and artifact. We need Sor Lacan in this game, guys. Come on,
yes. This is it. I think that this change actually kind of provides that. There was no early game. I was falling, playing last week. I was just falling asleep, playing the early game. The first 10 rounds, I don't care if I win. I don't care if I lose. I'm just oh, I can hit 20 gold here. Oh, I can hit 30 gold there. Then it's oh, do I hit the 50 at round 10 or round 11? That's it's always the same. I don't care if I win or if I lose. I think it was a very much necessary change to increase the damage.
And the earlier creep rounds are actually less time now as well. So that definitely contributes to the games being faster slightly. It also feels a lot better. All right. So one thing that they're going to be adding in the next big patch, whenever that may be, is, and I don't know if this is specifically, well, we'll just talk about it, the 1v1 mode. So what that essentially means is, at the very least, at the end of the game, when you're 1 versus 1, it's on one board. So it becomes much more hype. Like, I hope they have this before the We Play tournament, by the way, because that makes it so much more hype to watch instead of watching 2 boards at the end. And I'm sure we're all on board with this idea because I don't think there's any downside. But the question is, will they add this for the general, like the whole game, where you have the TFT 4 boards constantly? And if there's an odd number of players that just play like a phantom, like we are right now, essentially. What do you guys think of this general idea of the 1v1s?
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally for it. I think, like Savjz pointed out, right now there's a bit of a problem with the amount of RNG in fights with stuff like Primordials. So it kind of exacerbates that a bit. But I mean, if they can kind of patch that out at the same time, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I think it's better overall. It's just, like, to me, it's just not high up on the tier list of things I care about. Like, to the point
I don't understand you. This is like the hypest thing. Like, in terms of spectating, this takes it up like 2 notches. I'm not even kidding. It makes it so much more hype. Guaranteed.
Right. And, like, I think it does help with the general problem of people feeling like the game's very empty as far as like other players. Like, even people I know that don't get super into any of the auto chess genre, you know, they'll watch something like TFT versus Underlords, and you know, not knowing all the details, not knowing every precise minute difference between the two. It's just one game feels like a bunch of people playing, and one game does not as much. And most people generally prefer things that are a little bit more interactive and fun like that. So if we can move towards that direction, I don't know, it's all good fun.
I think it was really important, that addition, especially for like any kind of tournament play and stuff. Imagine how much more excited, like Savjz fan, you mentioned it, like that it's a huge thing. It wasn't maybe like on the top of my list, but I think it's something that had to happen. Like trying to cast an event where there's 2 players remaining and they have 2 fights going on. Like, do you bounce between the boards and like, he won, but he also won? Like, that's so lame. Like, so now you actually have, like, you know where the spectator is going to be at. It's showing both of the players fight, and this draw is very unlikely. Like, both winning, both losing, that's just like who died first. I think it's awesome for like tournaments and any kind of spectating.
Yep, totally agree. Okay, so last segment of this episode of the podcast. Want to kind of ask Savjz some questions. Of course, you guys can chip in as you feel the need. You've obviously played more have you played more TFT than Swim? Swim, you played a little bit, right?
I played for like 6 hours.
Okay, that's just a tiny bit. You've played more than 6 hours, I assume, Savjz.
I was at the preview event for some NDA stuff like before the launch. So I played at like Riot for we played like 6 rounds, and I played like 4 rounds yesterday. That's it. And I played the Twitch Rivals event on Wednesday. But like the amount of rounds that I played total is maybe 15 of TFT.
Okay, well, suffice to say, you still have way more experience than any of us in the game. So I was actually interested in asking you a couple of questions in terms of like comparisons, if you don't mind. So in terms of like, what do you think is the biggest difference between the 2 games? Like, is it the item system or something totally different? The art style. We won't get into the art style. That's a whole tangent I'm not going to go into.
The biggest thing, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that that Underlords is a little bit like made like mobile first. I think that mobile first has like some of the things that maybe like TFT. I don't know, like we like not being able to like see right now. I know there's like more PC stuff coming up, but the stuff that affects right now, like people keep asking me like, can you show alliances and damage meter and like swap between that? So there's some of the awkwardness in Underlords right now, but I think that Underlords is like, on the other hand, like that's kind of like the downside of Underlords. I think that there's some like things that are in favor of TFT when watching it, but I think that Underlords is like mechanically wise and like gameplay wise is like way better. I think there's a lot more like depth to it, and I just in TFT, I don't know. It just feels a little shallow. I feel like there might be some like the players are gonna be hitting skill ceiling in that game much faster, and I think that the top like echelon of like gameplay, there will be a lot of like players who are like doing pretty much like exactly the like same thing. I think there's a lot more adaptation and and stuff, thanks to the global items and stuff in
Everything-
Underlords.
Everything you're saying, I know it's not a one-to-one comparison. It feels like you're talking about Dota versus League. That's my initial impression. So, in terms of the future of Underlords as an esport, let's say, we'll open it up to everybody. What do you guys think of the future of the game in those terms?
I think it definitely has potential. Like, people ask me this all the time. It's not going to be as big as like Dota, but it easily could be the size of like Stone, like as an esport. I think that's totally fine. I do want to point out, between like skill ceiling of Underlords versus TFT, is that the positioning on the bigger board just matters so much.
Yeah.
Yep, that's one of the big things. Like, there's very little when it comes to positioning that you can do, or like trying to counter like your opponent. Like, yeah, sure. I'm sure there's some moves, and like I haven't played all that much TFT, but it definitely, like, from the streams that I watched too, like the small board, and like honestly, like even the hexagon squares, I almost feel like those almost like reduce the amount of control you have, because you don't, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like it feels weird, like on the units that they attack and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can explain it very well.
Okay. I believe we have reached the end of the podcast. Unless you guys want to discuss anything off the top, you can discuss literally. It doesn't even have to be related to Underlords. In fact, we have no fun section today because Zeno forgot to write it. Thanks, Zeno. Really appreciate that.
I'm sorry. Does anyone have a good Instant Pot recipe? That's fun, right?
Oh
Like
my God,
InstantPot.com.
This is the worst meme ever, by the way. It's not
Yeah,
funny.
whatever.
Please stop.
I'm very old. It's not like that.
All right, so cool. That is the end of the podcast. As I said, you can find this on all the audio podcast apps, Google, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. Swim and Zeno, as always, will be joining me for every episode. This will be Fridays. It's going to be available on, like I said, audio, but also on YouTube for Dota Cinema. Savjz, thank you so much for joining us. It's awesome of you
thank
to
you.
like to have you on future episodes. If you will grace us with your presence in the near future. So appreciate that. Any last words for everybody, Savjz?
Thanks for having me. Like, I'll be back if you want to have me. Not every week, but like when there's big patches and stuff, even there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, it could be fun. So yeah, thanks, and hope to do
Sounds
this
good.
again sometime.
I was going to just skip by you guys, but Zeno, Swim, would you like to say any last words before we bid everybody
I've
adieu?
already said my last words. Apparently, Instant Pot's been shut down by everyone, so that's all I got. I'm sorry.
Swim?
I'm good.
By the way, I just want to, for all the people that are listening on the audio, I'm so sorry. Swim, his mic has just been all over the place this episode. I couldn't do anything about it. You can tweet at him anytime you want. Just berate him. He can take it. He's a big boy. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening. Until next time, the Underlords podcast with the most original name of all time, signing out. Goodbye.